Praise your holy name, Father. Take these words, do this teaching the way you want it taught. Let your holy will be done in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Today I'm going to teach a little bit on the book of Esther, okay? The book of Esther is on a very young orphan girl who was raised by her uncle, Malachi. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but it was her uncle. And they were captive at this time in Persia. And the Persian king, at the beginning of the story had a big banquet going on. I mean, you know, a party. The Persians knew how to party. A lot of drinking and a lot of sin going on. And the whole banquet was drunk, and so therefore the king had decided that he wanted his wife, the queen, to come out and basically parade herself before all the people naked, only wearing an emblem, and she refused to do it. And when she did, it made the men of the council angry, because it set a precedent that if she could do it and get by with it, then their wives could do it and get by with it. So the wives were supposed to obey the husbands totally. Be totally submissive, respectful, did whatever the husband said. So therefore she lost her ruling as queen. So this caused the episode that was set up for the king to search for a new queen to take her place. And this is what occurred into this event of selecting these virgin women of his country, and Hadassah, which her uncle named her Esther, to keep her descent, where she come from, hidden. And in fact, he kept it hidden that he was even her uncle, because people knew he was Jewish. So the plot begins to thicken when the people were going to kill the king, and Esther's uncle come and sent word that the king was going to be killed. So in other words, it saved his life. So found favor. But in the meantime, Haman, it says over in Esther chapter 3, after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set him above all the princes that were with him. So he took this man that was a Agagite and set him up. Well, to find out where this Haman come from, we have to go back from the beginning, and why he hated the Jews. See, it was really an ancestral curse. But for us to understand what was going on during this time, and why if rules and regulations from God had been fulfilled in the first place, it wouldn't have happened. But let's go back and see how they were born. Haman come from a nation that was supposed to be totally wiped out. In fact, in Exodus, the 17th chapter, it reads at the 8th verse, the Amalekites come and fought with Israel at Rephaim, and Moses said to Joshua, pick some men for us and go out, do battle with the Amalekites. Today I will station myself on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. And Joshua did as Moses told him and fought the Agagites. And when Moses, Aaron came up to the top of the hill, then whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, the Agagites prevailed. But Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took stones and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur, H-U-R, one on each side, supported his hand, and thus his hands remained steady until the sun set. And Joshua overwhelmed the people of the Agagite with his sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, inscribe this in a document as a remembrance, and read it aloud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of the Agagite from heaven. And Moses built an altar and named it Adonai-Nessi, and said it means, hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will be at war with the Agagites throughout the ages. So here God is declaiming that he would be warring against them throughout the ages. And why? Why would he take such a severe stand against them? Why would God say these people must be wiped out? Because in Deuteronomy 25:17 it says, remember what the Agagite did to you on your journey after you left Egypt, how undeterred by fear of God he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when the Lord your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you in that land the Lord your God is giving you a heritage portion, you shall blot out the memory of the Agagites from under heaven, and do not forget. So there was another command. He had said, when you get over there in that land, you are to wipe them out. This whole nation is to be wiped out. Well, I got to wondering on my search, where did they come from? Where did they begin? And that's going all the way back to Genesis, which tells us that Esau, Jacob's brother, was a man that married the women. Esau, the 26th chapter of Genesis says, this is the line of Esau, that is Edom, Esau took his wives from among the Canaanites. Now this is important. Adham, A-D-A-H, daughter of Elon the Hittite. She was also the daughter of Zabani the Hebron, and also Basnith, that's going back through the generations, the daughter of Ishlam. I mean, not Ishlam, but Ishmael. So we see that this line of group of people has extended all the way back to Ishmael, up to Esau, which A-D-A-H, Aram, the wife of Esau, she gave birth to a son called Elipphaz. And he married Timna, Timna, which, he didn't marry, she was a concubine of Ishmael. Not Ishmael, but of Esau. Ishmael, yes. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, Ishmael was the son, Eliphaz was the son of Ishmael, and whenever his concubine conceived and bore Amalek. So we see that this nation is a direct descendant from Ishmael down to we see that he is a direct descendant from Abraham with the Egyptian woman who had Ishmael. In a way, because of the unbelief of Sarah. And then we see Isaac being born out of Sarah, coming up, and him and Rebekah had twins, Jacob and Esau. Now, Esau was the grandfather of the Amalekites. We also see over here where the Amalekites come up on Israel as they were out in the desert and attacked Israel and cut off the stragglers after a day of hard traveling. They were famished, they were tired, there were stragglers out there that was coming up. They were getting ready probably to set up camp or something, and they come down from the mountains and they slaughtered the weak, the helpless. They slaughtered them. So God made a decree that this nation was supposed to be wiped off the face of the earth. So we go to 1 Samuel. And in the 15th chapter, Samuel tells Saul that the Lord, who had sent to anoint him as king, had gave him an order to go out and execute the Ammonites for their assault that they had made on the road. The assault, primarily the assault, that they had made on Israel on the road out of Egypt. And he wanted everyone killed. He wanted men, women, infants, stock, ox, sheep, cattle, asses. He wanted them all killed. He wanted nothing saved. But so Saul goes up there, and Saul begins to fight against them, and he destroys them. But there's something like that. But the troops and Saul spared Agagite. And they also spared the best of the sheep, the ox, and the second born, the lambs, and all else that was of value. I mean, God had gave him an order to destroy everything, because even the name of the animals would have that name Agagite on it. Now, when God saw this, he came to Saul and he says, I regret that I made Saul king, for he has turned away from me and he has not carried out my command. So Samuel was distressed about this. He entertained the Lord all night long. Samuel prayed for Saul. He prayed for him. He interceded for him. But finally, Samuel had to get up and go down there to Saul at Mount Carmel. And he went down there where Saul was. And if you've read the story, you understand that there was a confrontation between Samuel and Saul at this point. And he brings Agagite, the king, in, and Samuel himself kills the Agagite. So he accomplishes partly what Saul couldn't, but because of Saul's ignorance, because of Saul's disobedience, the Agagite line went on. There is a oral story that his wife, his king's wife, had escaped and she was pregnant. And it happened to be with a son that rejuvenated the Agagites back. But because of Saul's disobedience of not totally wiping out this nation like God told him to, for a specifically good reason, he lost the kingdom. This is why one of the main reasons that Saul lost the kingdom, because God had said it before Moses ever got the children over into the promised land, or he didn't go, but the children went over. Before they ever went over there, they were to kill these people, destroy their seed off the face of the earth. But Saul, in his neglect, didn't do it. Saul had only been a ruler of Israel for 2 years, and when all of this happened, and Samuel plainly says, you have been foolish. You have not kept the commandment of God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. In other words, his line was cut off. It says, the Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord was commanded him to be a commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. And so he was going to bring up another person, in which we know it was David. So all of this, through the disobedience of Saul, we see this line persist all the way up to when this group of Jewish people was in captivity in Persia. And this man that should not have been there, that was an Agagite, who was a descendant from that king, if the orders had been fulfilled back then, he wouldn't have been here. But because of disobedience to God, Haman existed and wanted once again to destroy all the Jews. It was born in his nature. It was put through him, through his descendants, to have a natural hate for Israel and want Israel to be wiped off the face of the map. And if we look around today, as times are going on, that we still see the seed of this nation, these people that was supposed to be wiped out, still exist, and they still come up against Israel. For that line still exists over there, and they still hate Israel just as much as Haman hated Israel. So it took an event like this for a young Jewish girl to become a wife to a Persian king that would spare the life of that nation by giving them the authority to fight instead of just being killed like sheep led to slaughter. He gave the order that they could take up arms and fight against their enemies, which they did, and they prevailed. But it took the courage of this young Jewish girl obeying. Out of all of this disobedience, we see this young girl standing up, doing what her uncle told her to do, and finding favor in the very courts of this Persian king that would put her in the position to become his wife. But when the main story of it all unfolds, is that yes, she is the king's wife, but the orders are that before you could become before the king, whether you're queen or what, you had to get permission to come. Well, all of these events with Haman having the date set that the Persian king had gave him the decree, had said yes, and gave him the seal that he could do this law, that all the Jews were going to be killed. And Haman would see his enemies wiped off the face of the earth. But when Esther was told, you've got to go before the king, you've got to do something about this. You're in that position. God has put you in a place of high position, and that you are going to have to do something to stop this mass slaughter. And of course, Esther is going, but I have to get permission to go before the king, and I have no permission. And that if I go up there unannounced, if I go without permission, he could have me killed. So her uncle, and some even believe Daniel was part of this. I don't know, but she was plainly told, if you don't do this, if you don't do the will of God, and although it's not saying, it really doesn't mention a lot about God in here. I mean, but the uncle told her, you were placed here for such a purpose and time as this. You were placed here to protect your people. So she has to make a decision of what she's going to do. Let's read it in Esther chapter 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes. See, he knows that Haman and the king had sat down and drank and made this proclamation for all the Jews to be killed. So Mordecai rents his clothes, puts on sackcloth with ashes, and went into the midst of the city and cried with a loud voice, a bitter cry, and come even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothes with sackcloth. And in every province wheresoever the king commanded, and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many laying in sackcloth and ashes. They knew they was going to die. As Esther's maid and her chamber came and told it her, then was the queen exceedingly grieved. See, she didn't know. And she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hatach, Heka, one of the king's chamberlains, who he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a command to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the streets of the city which was before the king's gate, and Mordecai told him of all that happened unto him, and of the sermon of some of the money that Haman promised to pay the king's treasure for the Jews to be destroyed. So Haman was going to pay a great deal of money for the Jews to be killed. Also he gave the copy of the writ of the decree that was given at Shinar to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplement unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Malachi. Again Esther spoke unto Hathach, and gave him a commandment unto Malachi. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provisions do know that whatsoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except which to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king this 30 days. And they told it to Malachi, Esther's words. And then Malachi commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. In other words, he says, Esther, do you think you're going to escape just because you're the queen? You're a Jew. You will be killed too. For if thou together holdest thy peace at this time, then shall they enlarge and deliverance arise, and then shall their enlargement and deliverance shall arise to the Jews from another place. In other words, he's saying, if you don't do this, Esther, the deliverance will arise from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knows whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So he's telling Esther, if you don't do it, if you don't obey, your house will be destroyed. Your father's house will be destroyed. But there will be a deliverer. So you're set up at this moment in the kingdom for a time such as this. And Esther bid then return to Malachi this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shinar, and fast ye for me. Neither eat nor drink 3 days, nights or day. Also my maid will fast likewise. So shall I go into the king, which is not accepted to the law. And if I perish, I perish. And so Malachi did as she had asked. So we see this young girl knowing her life is in the king's hands. But she obeyed, and she went before the king. And let's read a little bit. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal appearance, then stood in the inner court of the king's house. Remember, she was not commanded to come, so she wasn't supposed to be there. Over against the king's house, and the king sat up upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drawed nigh and touched the top of the scepter. This whole story of Esther is about disobedience and obedience. And once again, we will see this all unfolding For Yeshua will one day extend that golden scepter. And I've had a vision of it. I've seen it. But he will extend that golden scepter to his bride. And we will reach up and touch the head of the scepter as we are going home. We today must become obedient to him and prepare ourselves with the royal garments to go stand. To go stand where did she go stand? She went and stood in the inner court. One day, we will also stand in the inner court. Esther is the sign of what could have been if people had not disobeyed, and what will be because of a little Jewish girl's obedience, even at the point of death, will occur again. The Amalekites are still alive and quite well on this earth. And I have always believed that if you would search the background of Hitler, you would find that he is from the same line of Haman. From that very same line that hated the Jewish people and wanted to see him wipe off the face of the map. We are now in the days of Purim, where God saved the Jews, and he will do it again. Blessings in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.